So usually we start these podcasts with just who are you or who is X. However, this one's a little bit different because we've obviously approached you because of the evidence of who you are as a brand photographer. So, as a quick intro to anyone listening, because the whole point in this podcast is Kate and I are reaching out to people, or people are reaching out to us, with a qualified stack of evidence to say that they're worth speaking to take their knowledge, bundle it all up into this podcast, and push it out to makers of the world. So we're here with Nicole. It's Nicole Bedard. And Nicole, yes. If I'm right in thinking, from reading your website, so talk about stack of evidence. So, digital photography professional certificate from Boston University, interior design certificate from Rhode Island School of Design, BS in leadership and consumer economics, and master's degree in public administration. You're a webinar speaker for the Rhode Island School of Design. Product Photography 101 for the Rhode Island School of Design, that's your webinar, and published nationally and internationally. Now, you've got a huge list of clients. From obviously creative industries, letterpress and stationery, right up to, you know, big names that we'd all recognise, the Reeboks and the CrossFits of the world. So that's on paper, that's like the CV, that's who Nicole Bedard is. But who is Nicole Bedard?
Ooh, that's a good one. So I'm a creative and at heart. And as a true introvert, I know in the beginning of my career, it was always, I wanted my work to do all the talking. And as I progressed through brand photography and really putting a spotlight on other businesses, especially creatives, that's really where my heart is. And I want them to have the marketing that they need in order to have as many people put eyes on what they're doing, because many creatives dedicate so much time that the marketplace does not see. And that's really where my heart is, because there's so much time and dedication, and that's what I want to celebrate. And I want as many people as possible to see their craft, because there are so many amazing people out there that are creating amazing products. So for me, I'm a creative at heart, and that's why I just want to get out there and capture and put a giant spotlight on every creative that needs, you know, a boost in marketing.
Love it.
So why do you think it's so important for creatives to... I mean, it's going to sound like one of those stupid questions that's like everyone knows the answer to, but I'm always intrigued as to what other people's answer to. You know, like a good hive session, sometimes you just don't expect the answers that come out. Why do you think it's so important for other people to use services like brand photography? And we'll get into in a bit like what is brand photography, but use services like yours, and why is it important to you that the people you're working to put themselves out in the way that you facilitate?
I think it's important because you don't have to be a big commercial brand with big budgets to have proper images to get your marketing message across, and get your products out there. I don't think creatives give themselves enough credit to put their face in front of the work instead of having their work do all the talking. People benefit from a brand photographer because I not only have my photography hat on for the brand, but I also have my marketing hat on for the brand, because they are wearing all the hats in their business. They don't have to be a full-time photographer as well on top of all the other things that they're doing. I study their business. I understand where they're going through collaboration and conversations, and we craft a plan in order to meet their marketing goals. Whether they know what they are in the beginning or not, I help guide them through the process, so then their level of success is even higher.
Love it.
So it's a good segue into it. What is the difference between, in your head, what is the difference, or in your words, between a photographer and a brand photographer? Because, self-included, like, I didn't even know we needed a brand photographer until I started talking to you while I was making dinner the other night on FaceTime. And I was like, shit, I need a brand photographer. So what is a brand photographer, and why is it so important that, or what is the cases that it's so important that you need a brand photographer over just a photographer? And obviously there's cases where you like a photographer will suit the bill, but there is obviously cases where a brand photographer fits the bill.
Yes. So I define brand photography as photography with a marketing approach. So every image I capture has intention and purpose behind it. So unlike a traditional, let's say, portrait photographer, where you schedule a portrait session, they either come to your studio, shop, store, or you go to a location, you grab a great new headshot that you can put on your about page, and you're on your way. Brand photography, there's a lot of prep work and strategy and meetings prior to a photo shoot ever happening. So what we do is we discuss who you are, how your business started, where your business is now, and where it's going. So then we can craft images to support future launches, to maybe you're updating the website and you need images to support all the things that you're doing and working on. So with a brand photographer, I'm not only capturing the portraits that you need, but I'm capturing all the lifestyle, the process, the action of you making your product, which I think that's the branding magic in that zone. And then I'm also capturing product photography. If you have products, if you're a service-based business, we're capturing kind of those end resulting images as well. So it's a whole package to tell your brand story versus just getting a great portrait.
Right. So there's feels like there's as much of it. Obviously, there's the day's shoot or however many days shoot, but there's a huge portion of it that happens beforehand. Like this whole thing happens beforehand. And what is the kind of things you're looking for? So, like, if we're approaching you now, let's do the role play. You know, we're approaching you now. What is the kind of things you're looking for in a creative, or what should other creatives be expecting their brand photographer to be asking, so they know they're getting a good brand photographer? Because that's one thing, right? Like, we're well aware where you're situated. People can't all come to you. But what we can now do here is we can say to people like, look, Nicole's very qualified. She's got this huge stack of evidence that shows she's a good brand photographer. This is what you need to be looking for your brand photographer. So what do those initial meetings look like? What should people be looking for? What are you looking for in those discussions?
This is a great question because it always pains me when I start talking with someone and they tell me the story of, oh, well, I had photography or images taken by someone that I know that has a nice camera, and I got a couple usable images. That pains me because you took so much time to make yourself available when you're doing all these other things to get images, and they don't have images that will work for them. So my number one thing to tell when I tell people when they're looking for brand photographers is that they have some sort of strategy meeting or brand story meeting built into their process. Like, if you go on my website, you will see how I lay out my process so people know exactly what they're going to expect. So when you start researching, you want to see that your brand photographer has some sort of meeting, whether it's on Zoom or it's on a call, prior to any photo shoot happening. That's like red flag number one. You want them not to just book a date and show up at your shop expecting like brand images. So the other thing that I always advise people to do is go on their website and look at their style of images, look at their products, and look at their projects that they're working on to see if you like what they're doing and producing. I also suggest start following them on social and on social media, hopefully the brand photographer is putting their self out there so you can get a sense of who they are and build that kind of what they say, that know, like, and trust. Because bottom line, you want to be comfortable with your photographer. If you are in all of these things, you just have more meetings with people. You're just building that client experience and client relationship. That's what's important to me, because when they're comfortable on photo shoot day, the images are that much better. So those are kind of the key things that I always have people do when they're looking for a brand photographer in their area.
Makes a lot of sense. So the big red flag would be that if someone's just booking a date and turning up. Because, as you've just explained, if they don't understand the brand, how can they be a good brand photographer? And what sort of things is it you're really looking to find out from makers to make sure that that shoot with you is the best possible? You know, what questions should makers be looking out for? What information should they be providing you? You know, at the moment, I wouldn't even know what to tell. Like, I'd obviously tell you our story, I'd tell you what we're about, I'd tell you what we're trying to achieve. But what is it that you're really looking for that really makes the difference between knowing enough to do the perfect photography and just missing the mark?
Sure. So prior to our first conversation, I start doing my own research on your brand, for example. So I get a sense of where you are right now. I may identify some gaps in imagery that I think would be powerful for your brand. And then once we get on the call, I have the client kind of lead me in what their story is, how they got there. And as I'm listening, I'm also thinking of visuals that can support part of their story. So many times someone comes to me when they are in the middle of a rebrand and they're redoing their website. So if they have copy that they're going to be adding to a website, I kind of ask to see all the back end work that's happening. The key is I want to know where they're going. What launches do they have upcoming, maybe in the next 6 months? What audience do they want to hit? If they want to like change things up, maybe they want to go for a higher end client, for example, and we strategize on what images could represent that. So not only do I want to know the origin story, I really want to know where their vision is for the future. So then they have the bank of images ready to go when they start talking about this on social media or updating their website. So those are key things. If you know where the images are going to land, whether it's a website or just for social, those are key for your photographer because we shoot differently. I know when I'm doing sort of like a website project, I'm going to be shooting more horizontal than maybe vertical. But if I'm going to, maybe it's only social media, most of the time it's always a mix. I go through my photography process capturing vertical and horizontal images so that gives them more options after the photo shoot.
Yeah, that's always helpful, isn't it?
Yeah, because a lot of certainly some of the issues that we've had before is, and I'm sure we're not alone, and if we are alone, maybe we're just crap at this, is that you just go to the photographer and you want the photographer to know everything, right? You want the photographer to just, like, as you say, look at your stuff, be like, this is the style that's going to fit them. And oftentimes you, of course, pick a photographer because the style you feel matches your stuff.
Yeah.
But what is the style going forward? How does this process, so you obviously we've spoke a lot about brand photography, but you also do brand video as well. How does the process differ for brand video, or does it?
With brand video, we're typically really micro focused on one product or one project. So if it's a marketing video, I always want them to build out a script, exactly what they want to say, whether it's 100% on filming day or not. But I want them to have an outline of what they want to say versus I just sit them in front of a camera and they just start going, because that could be a 3-minute video when it really should only be a 60-second video, So it's on such a micro level if they're doing like a marketing video. So if many times I've worked with them for photography, so I will already know their brand. But if they're brand new to they just want video, I go through some of the same paces to learn what their brand is now, what their current branding is like, and we kind of pull out what their messaging is. So that message or script for the video is the real driver on the creative end. Because if they're going to say something about their studio space, I need B-roll of their studio space. So it's kind of like that kind of drives the shot list, let's say.
Right. What about the people, and you must come up against it a lot. What about the people that are not confident in front of the camera? That don't want. Yeah, there's a lot of them. Yeah. We've got a couple of big projects just now, and we've been speaking to a lot of people about them. Projects that we're representing other brands and doing with makers. And there's a lot of people that just are not comfortable in front of a camera, whether that's photography or video. How do you approach that in your business, and what tips can you give those people?
This is another great question, because you're right. I would say 90+% are not comfortable in front of the camera, but they know in order to move the needle in their business, they have to push through that fear and do it anyways. I know from personal experience, because as a photographer, I don't necessarily want to be in front of the camera either, but doing it over and over and over again, you do get more comfortable, and you do see the impact of being in front of the camera versus hiding behind the camera. You see the impact in your business, you see the response from people, and over time, you kind of take your own insecurities and put them to the side, because you know it's doing great for your business that you've put your blood, sweat, and tears into. So a couple things in terms of tips. When I was talking about the whole strategy meeting process that I have and how we meet on Zoom to go through, like I have a whole presentation of visuals so that I have the visual ideas in my head, but I want to be able to communicate that to the client. So many times they're not visual. So to do that, I put this whole presentation together so that we're on the same page. During that process, we're really building that relationship. I mentioned how I want people comfortable for photo shoot day and for video day. So doing those items throughout the process is helping me make them comfortable in front of the camera. I always get the client every once in a while that is so afraid to do it, and by the end, they're so excited to book the next session. That's my level of, that's when I'm like, okay, this was a successful shoot. When they're so excited, they don't want it to end and they're ready for the next session. So here are some tips. First, on the photographer side, you want to make sure your client's comfortable along the way, and building that relationship is key. But if you're on social media and you really are hesitant to get in front of the camera and to film yourself, I always suggest, if you even do a time lapse where you don't have to say anything, but someone can visually see you, that's a win. If someone can see your hands making something, that's a win. You're still putting your personal touch in the video. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to be looking at the camera. All those little things build up till one day that you're comfortable to just do it. You might have to take several takes, especially if you're doing like a story. I always try to do baby steps with people, like do a story. It's only going to last for 24 hours. I just don't take a story clip and it's just a one take and I move on. I may have to do 10 takes and then I like one of the clips. So I think people have some expectations that they have to be perfect right out of the gate. And you have to continue. You have to just keep doing it, and it improves over time. It's scary in the beginning, but I promise you it gets easier the more you do it. Another last tip that I want to mention, that on Instagram, you can now do voiceover. And I find this very valuable because if I'm doing, let's say, a time lapse of me packing up all my gear for a photo shoot, and I do have a message that I want to say, but I don't want to come on camera, I can now do a voiceover, and that gives that personal touch to that video. So there's so many options, and they're only adding on like different things that you can do that you don't have to be forward facing right out of the gate.
Yeah, baby steps.
The stepping stones concept's really nice that you've outlined there. So summarise that for me. You do like time lapse, hands, story. Summarise that again for me, because we talked a lot about it and a lot about the why, but what is the summary? So here's me, Jack Lennie, we are makers, don't want to get in front of a camera. I know that for my business in 6 months I need to be prevalent in front of the camera. What is that stepping stone looking like?
Sure. So first, your expectations to get in front of the camera and hit it out of the park the first go is too much pressure for yourself. I always recommend some baby steps. So whether someone can see your hands making something on film, that's kind of step one. Step two would be doing a time lapse in your studio, whether you're making something, packing up orders, getting a delivery of products, laying out your tools on the workbench. That is like level two. You could also add it to your stories if you wanted to do a forward-facing video. After a few takes, you could pick one you like, add it to your stories. It's only going to live for 24 hours. And over time, with more practice, the more doing, it does get easier.
Yeah, it does.
Makes a lot of sense.
I've done it myself.
That's exactly where we've been, and these are the kind of conversations that we're really looking to have at the moment. Is, you know, people just need to hear it, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so much on the there's so much. It's not easy. Kate's right, but there's also so much on the internet. Like, just go and do it. It'll be fine. You need to do it. Like, big shout, talking head. Everything's perfect. You just need to do it. Like, that isn't for everybody, and we all need to appreciate that there's a whole bunch of people that isn't for.
Mm-hmm. And we do talk about this a lot. It's like on Instagram, you'll scroll through someone's profile and they've got some really nice products. And I'm like, but I want to see who's behind it. And you're like, I really want to. It's even just like a profile picture. And I always say to someone, if you have a profile picture, just pin it to the top of your profile or something, just so people can see who the person is, then see their products. And I feel like there's a lot of people out there that like don't think, oh, I don't need a professional photography taken, but you know, I think it's so important, especially when you're, you know, creating, like you're wanting your business to grow. And I think it is important to have those images.
Absolutely. You know, there's a lot going on at the moment with big manufacturers trying to look like small makers as well. So one of the hardest jobs, I'll say for us, but 99% of it's Kate. Like she's the driving force behind this. That when you're trying to find makers, it's like, who is actually a maker? You see great stuff all the time, but if it's just this perfectly polished grid, now nothing against a perfectly polished grid, but a perfectly polished grid of finished products, I don't know if you're making that or if you're buying and selling that, because you've got drop shipping, you've got, you know, Amazon FBA, you've got all these other great get rich quick schemes that seem to be taking over the internet. Like, and this is why I want to speak to people like you, because as a brand photographer, I want to know what makes those kind of profiles that I've just described redundant and make the profiles of hands, laying out tools, studio space. How do we make those profiles shine? Because ultimately, Kate and I are looking for makers every day. You know, we're trying to share, even at the most basic level in our story, 5 to 10 profiles a day that we've just seen. And the biggest job is working out if it's a real person or not.
Yeah.
That's where we need the sort of advice from people like yourself. Like, what would be those key images that you're looking for from a customer? The key images that show that there's a real person behind this. Like, yeah, this looks slick and it looks great and here's the finished product, but this is the thing that makes us know it's a person.
So it's key that you want to see the person. This is like the not new marketplace, but versus back in the day, today's marketplace, people want to know who they are investing in, who they are buying from. That really can tip the scales. And that's why brand photography is so important to have these images to tell your story, because people will connect with that and they will become customers, they will become supporters. Any new launch they have, they will be out there with you. So key images, I would recommend one, of course, you want a picture of yourself somehow, whether it's, you're in a great portrait image goes a long way, and you typically get the most bump on a social media platform if you post something with yourself. People really resonate with that. Other images are your process and action. So if you're using unique materials, unique machinery, unique tools, you're in a unique place, you want to showcase that. That is what it not only makes your business unique, it's what makes you unique, and people will connect with those things as well. And then you have your products. I feel like a lot of people may lead with products, but if you could kind of go 50-50 with finished products and then the process of making that finished product, you'll have such a great formula for success on social.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I think
It's amazing, like when you post, like just for example, we post a picture of the magazine compared to a picture of a magazine with hands, and then a picture of the magazine with someone. Like the engagement with that post goes from here to like up here. So I can see.
And ultimately, that's what sells, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Like as someone trying to run a business, like we all need to put food on the table. We're trying to run a business. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell me so we've covered all the like pre-meetings and the stepping stones and the sort of the path. We're now at a position where we want you, Nicole, to come out and do a shoot with us. What does that look like?
So we have our strategy meeting. I develop a shoot list, a prop list. Many times it may be a couple weeks before the photo shoot, which helps if you need to get more product, you want to do a different tool, you need something special for the photo shoot day. For makers, I have 2 avenues where I recommend how we do photo shoot day, and that's around whatever they're making. So I recommend 2 options. One is they have a product or they have a custom product, let's say, that they're making for a client. And I document their action process images of them making whatever this is. So there is an actual client in the back end. I've done this with a floral designer. I went to a wedding install and captured her doing what she does with the florals. So there was an actual client, she had an actual job. But if you don't have an actual client or an actual job that for photo shoot day, then my second option is you're going to make up a mock client, and that's what we're going to capture on photo shoot day. An example of this is I worked with a calligrapher who she didn't have like a big wedding or a big event that she was working on, but she wanted to make products, one cohesive line of everything she will make, because she also does engraving, all the different things that she does for her job as a calligrapher in one cohesive like project. And she wanted to use high-end paper products to attract that high-end client. So we basically invented a mock client in order to shoot for photo shoot day. So for makers, yes. Yeah. So she used all the product, like all the things that she does. So in order to capture her action process and her services, essentially, that she can offer her client. So I feel like for makers, I normally go down those 2 roads, whether we have an actual client and I'm documenting their process of creating that product, or we create a mock client and that's what we're photographing on photo shoot day. For the actual photo shoot day, I tend to not go over 3 hours because can be very exhausting. especially with all the images that we're trying to capture. We're going through the shoot list. We're going through all the different setups, and you want to be fresh for your photo shoot. But I also understand that you're a business owner too, and all the other things are happening, whether you're on photo shoot day or not. So so my plan through all the strategy meetings and everything is I want to be so efficient of our time and make sure that you get exactly what we described and outlined by the end of the photo shoot day. So that's kind of how it flows on photo shoot day.
You know, the 3-hour photo shoot thing's interesting, isn't it? Because that's not normally what you hear with photographers. Usually it's like, here's the price, and they add value by adding more hours. Like, oh, this is the price, but I'll be with you 6 or 8 or 10 hours. And actually what you're describing is, this is the price, and I'm with you for 3 hours, but they're 3 quality hours. Have you ever done it the other way, and what do you think the key difference is? Or for other people looking for it, why do you think it's so important to go for someone that's actually like, it's almost like an anti-guarantee. It's just like, no, I'm not going to be with you all day. I'm going to be with you for these very few hours, and we're going to smash out exactly what we need to smash out.
Yeah. I mean, the only occasion I can think that going beyond 3 hours is if we're going to multiple locations. So that's the only time that, because we have to build in travel, we might have to extend the hours. But the goal is still the goal. How many portrait shots do you actually need? We need maybe 3 killer types of portrait shots, one in your studio in the environment, maybe one that's a little bit tighter that you can use as a bio image, or if you're speaking at an event, you kind of need a little pool. You don't want to be using the same one for social media posts all the time. It becomes white noise. So how many images do you really need? You don't need to capture 2,000 images in order to just get the 30 killer shots that you need for your website. You want someone that knows what they're doing, that they can accomplish the goal, because time is also a currency. Like, you need to be back in your business doing your craft and not being on a photo shoot, exhausting yourself and getting the job done. Another thing that popped into my mind about being comfortable in front of the camera or unsure on photo shoot day is as I'm shooting this different setups, I have all the images flowing directly to my iPad. And so as we're shooting, they're seeing the images come through real time. And that is an instant, like, you see the pressure just melt away, because one, they're surprised that they look good and they're excited. And they're like, the studio looks great, or, oh, wow, okay, now I see where we're going. And there's just this instant comfort, and they know they're getting exactly what they need. And that's where the excitement builds up. So that's another trick that I have on photo shoot day, to make sure they can see the images and see exactly what's happening, and in their vision coming to life. So they're on board at that point. You can just see the stress.
Because traditionally, but traditionally you're absolutely right. Traditionally you would book this day, you'd have the whole day, and then the anxiety would creep in after the photographer leaves. Like, one, I've just spent all that money. A lot of small makers and small businesses don't have that money to spend. And, like, when am I getting them back, and are they going to be good? Like, the first time you see any of them, maybe a photographer will show you a couple of little swatches on the back of a camera, but they're, for the most part, useless on a 3-inch screen, right? So, and how do you do that? Is that just a straight link straight to your iPad? There'll obviously be software for it, and it just takes it straight away. And something you would recommend maybe other makers, especially if they're not familiar with being on the camera or not comfortable with being on the camera, they seek out a photographer that does do that. Is it pretty common practice these days?
Most of the time they're just showing you the back of the camera. I try to showcase this, and now I'm seeing some more photographers doing it in my like local area, it would be amazing, because I see the impact in the quality and the client experience goes through the roof, because they feel like they're part of the process too. Because when you're seeing it in a larger format, you can also see things in the background that you're like, oh, wait, let me move that plant. Or, oh, I don't like how that thing's hanging up. Like, oh, I need to get rid of that. I meant to dispose of this. Or, oh, this would be great. Let me add it to the image. So they feel like they're part of the process, and it makes the images better. So that is, I wished more people would do that. Now, I'm a Canon shooter, so they just have, it's not the most robust app, but it works for this purpose, that I can, because my camera has built-in Wi-Fi, it can go right to my iPad through this app. So I use it on every shoot, no matter how big or small, and everyone always raves how this is so much better to see it in person live.
Yeah, we
Makes
did.
a lot of sense.
Did you not do it when we were doing the podcast? It was a Sony.
Not in that respect. I do use the. So obviously when we do the podcast, it's just Kate and I. So you'll set up the camera, a couple of meters away, and then you're trying to like squint at a little screen that's about this size, trying to work out if it's framed properly. So yeah, we've got the Sony thing that just beams to the iPad, so I can see how it's framed once we're all sat there. Otherwise, I have to get up, look at the camera. Yeah, Kate and whoever we're with's framed well, but when I sit down, I'll be out of frame, or just stuff like that. But it sounds like the same sort of app you're talking about, and it does make sense.
It's great.
Do you employ the same? Tactics when you're doing brand video then, like short shoot days plus, beaming straight to an iPad, showing people as you go?
For video, I have like a monitor that sits on top of my camera, so they can see essentially the setup. Like while I'm filming, I can see in a larger format, but they can kind of see things come back, like we can play it back. I tend to have shorter days on all my shoots. Sometimes it's like, again, if there's different locations, that's going to extend the day, but you want someone fresh and you want someone excited. When they start after so many hours, people just get tired, and it takes a lot of energy, and especially if they've had so much anxiety built up prior to the shoot, it's like, okay, now they're in the shoot, now the adrenaline's going, and that can only last so long, and you want a quality product at the end. So I tend to try to do shorter days and not have a full day.
Makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense.
So I'd assume like you'd be on shoot like all day, but no, it makes sense to do it in well planned.
Yeah.
That's the name of the game.
Well, whenever we've spoke to photographers, it's been this is my rate, but for that rate I'll do, they're adding on like extra hours, and I'm always a little bit cautious of that, because I'm like, well, if that's your rate, that's fine, just tell me your rate. I don't feel people need to, and I think a lot of creatives are involved, and maybe you've got a good strategy that you can share with us as to how to avoid this, but I feel a lot of people say their price, and photographers are expensive, relative, they're expensive, it's normally a bigger number, but there's so many things, cameras and everything that come into that, and there's the worth that they're providing. But I feel like a lot of people see that number, and then before even the client comes back, like i.e. the Kate and I comes back to them and says, oh, that's too much, they're already saying the and I will on top of that, What's your thoughts for, and it's kind of twofold, what's your thoughts for pricing as a photographer, because we do have a lot of photographers that we talk to and represent and we know listen to this, on pricing, but also the things to look out for as a creative employing a photographer. How does that all work for you, and how have you built your business around your strategy?
So I think your example, they're doing it backwards. First, they should be getting on a call with you so you can actually be talking to them and you're getting a clear understanding of the scope of work. That's like number one. someone that reaches out and says, I just want to know what X, like, what's the rate? I want to get on a call with them. I want to see what exactly they need, so then I can quote them appropriately. So, and that goes across anything, because there could just be a commercial shoot. I want to know what they need in order to get the right number, to be able to quote correctly. Number two is when I'm talking with someone, I am outlining my packages that I have. So I create packages that are scalable based on businesses. So some businesses are really small, some businesses are bigger and need more content. So it isn't just one brand package. I have like a tiered system based on where they are and what they need now. And most often they come back 6 months, a year later for the next round. I have clients that I work with every year for the past 5 years. They keep coming back because they need fresh brand images. I have clients where I see them every quarter because they need that much content for social. So it's scalable on a photography business end, but it's also, I want to make it approachable for the business owners because I know that they need this. So I create a mini package just to get them going. So we touch on all the categories of images that we talked about before. So they get the portraits, they get some action process, and they get some finished product. Then that's based on two things: time and the number of shots. So that will be an hour, hour and a half, and they will have 15 images for that package that they can run with. Another thing with brand photography is you as a maker will receive a commercial usage license for the images. And you can use them on your website, on your print marketing, on your social, wherever you promote your business. So if a photographer comes back to you and says, oh, website ready images are more money, this is X, Y, and Z, that's a red flag. Any images that you are capturing for your business can be used anywhere in your business with that commercial usage license. So that is something that you want to hear from a photographer as well. I am explaining all of this to my clients so they can see the value. Then I tell them the price, because once we go through, we have a strategy meeting. I'm designing concept boards. We get a shoot list. I'm traveling to your location. This is the amount of time. I'm editing the images. I'm providing a private gallery for you. Then when I get to the price, most people are like, great, let's book it. So it's all about explaining the value ahead of time, and then they see the value in the number.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I quickly just want to go back to the commercial license. So one, obviously, makers all provide us with their images. We have a document that makers all sign to say that they are able to provide us these images and we're able to use them however we see fit in print or in any of our digital stuff, so long as it's promoting the maker. We have had the odd instance where a photographer has come to us to say we weren't allowed to use the image despite all these agreements being in place, and the maker did have. Talk us a bit through all that. You know, this is purely just a for me or for anybody else in print or for anybody else as a maker. Where can't you use your images?
What's the law?
Yeah, where does it stand, you know, legally? And obviously I know you're over in the States, so it'll be different everywhere, but also morally. So, you know, to me, these makers pay a lot of money for these photographers to use to promote their business. We are promoting the maker's business. Unfortunately, we are not in a position where we can pay every maker for every submission. You know, if we got this company to a stage, we would be going out and we'd be doing the photography. We'd be speaking to people like you to go and do local photography. Of course we would. Why would we not? We would have our own images. It would just be perfect. But that's not the reality of the world we live in. So talk me through the whole licensing and how all that works and what makers should be aware of, because in the one or two cases that we have had issues, we've been able to sort it and it's all been good and the photographers have been understanding, out with the initial annoyance and, you know, point and finger game, which is never nice. But it was really stressful on the makers, because ultimately the makers had provided us with something that they felt they weren't allowed to. And equally, the photographer had...
Just a misunderstanding.
Yeah, they hadn't done anything wrong, but there was a misunderstanding. They thought we just kind of copy and pasted their images from elsewhere. So, how does it all work? And how can makers and how can people like us make sure we're making it work properly? And properly for the photographers, properly for the makers?
Well, first, hopefully there's a contract in place and it outlines how far the usage license goes. For example, from my perspective, it's if they're using it on their website, their social media platforms, print marketing, they're using the images for their business use. Publishing gets a little tricky because I have clients who there's like a local magazine and there's a conversation that happens beforehand on where, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, what makers need to express to their photographers, and it's where the image is going to be used and what image needs that you have. So when they're talking about, oh, I'm rebranding my website, oh, I'm going to be featured in a magazine, they may not know that, but it's good to at least have some understanding of where the images are going to be used. Now, it could happen years later. For local publications, I have no problem of them passing the images along and giving me photo credit. That's kind of like the tipping point. It's like, okay, if you're going to give me photo credit, then we're all good. When I have had big magazines, big national magazines that want to use a single image, that's where the magazine is actually contacting me and I'm getting compensated for that use of that image. That's the only kind of, it's not the amount of like publications that are being produced. It's almost like the level of publication that is where like I kind of draw the line. And most magazines that are using images and are paying photographers for the use, it's just common practice. They know that they can't just use the image. I don't know if that's clear enough, but that's kind of how I define it in my world, that all the local or smaller publications, as long as I'm getting photo credit, and sometimes makers reach out to me and say, hey, this is happening. They asked me if I had usage rights to give them the image to use. Do I? And they just asked me, and then we work it out. So that's one tip I would give a maker. If they do get media to reach out and say, you know, can we use these images? They should just reach out to the photographer and confirm that this is something they can pass along and they don't need to compensate. The publication would compensate if that's the case.
Nice.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's exactly how we're running it at the moment. You know, we're asking makers to make sure that it's all legit, and all the photographers are credited in the back, because ultimately, like, you guys are creatives and makers as well, right? So we want to make sure you guys are credited in what you're doing. So we've covered loads. I still have a few bits and bobs written down here. So we're on the shoot day. We've got a 3-hour shoot day all booked. We spoke on FaceTime the other night. You've got 3 categories of images that you like as a brand photographer to capture. What are those and why?
So we have the first category being that environmental portrait. So if I am typically traveling to a location. So not very often I'm having a maker go to a studio. I love going, or like a traditional photography studio. I love going to a maker's workshop studio, shop. I like the authentic surroundings and environment. So I love capturing one killer environmental portrait that tells the story of that maker in one shot. When you see this image, you know exactly who they are. So I love capturing one solid image like that they can use on their website and they could use in social media, etc. I will do some supplemental portraits as we're going through the process or the photo shoot, because they become more comfortable as the shoot goes along. So I kind of capture different lifestyle portraits to add to the gallery. That's just my process. The second category, which I have the most fun creating, are those lifestyle shots of them doing and making their product. So it's the action process phase. So this could be, you could see them in the shot. It could be their hands in the shot. It's them working and doing in their comfort zone. You get the best shots when they're in their comfort zone, they're doing their thing, and you're just documenting their process. The third category is if they do have a product, we may capture some product images, maybe not the full line, but a few key pieces. Maybe something's going to be launched soon. Maybe how they package it for consumers. If they ship them, maybe that end goal. We want to be able to speak to the entire journey of the business. So you know who the person is, this is what they do, this is what makes them unique, and this is the product that they're offering to the world. So those are the three main categories.
It's a good variety of images. Yeah,
it's a good variety that you could, like, you think about your marketing, whether it's socials, whether it's online, but you cover pretty much everything with that, right?
Yeah.
We certainly could do with it. And then how do... So we've gone through all that, we've done all our initial chats, we've talked about the categories, we've talked about the price, we've talked about all the value that comes with that price. We've now booked you to come and see us in our workspace, kitchen table. How do we make the most out of this situation? What should people be prepared for with a brand photographer? What should people look to have? You know, do you prefer them to have all their team in that day, or is it just the person? I mean, I know a lot of it will be dependent on the previous discussions, but how does someone really maximise that 3 hours with you?
So for the photo shoot day, the photographer should have provided the shoot list, the prop list, the concept boards. They know what's about to happen. And many times, if there are multiple people, I will break down kind of like a timeline. So I like to capture the portrait first, because most people have so much anxiety over the portrait. They just want to get it done. And then sometimes I circle back at the end, because now they're really comfortable and excited. So then we get even better shots. So I try to do the portrait first. And if there's team members, or many times if we have to bring like mock clients in to kind of show a consultation process, for example, I will have them come maybe 30 minutes in. So then we have solo, uninterrupted time for the portrait in the beginning, and makers typically appreciate that they can have their time, and then we bring in the team. If you do have a team, they're part of the brand session. If you have a photographer trying to price you per person, that's also a red flag. Whoever's on your team is in the brand shoot that you want. So that's also, it's not a headshot day. This is a brand photo shoot day. So they should have their props or their tools ready to go. They should know what product they're going to make. And we just kind of go through all the different setups and stages, and it becomes very efficient and effective overall shoot.
Makes a lot of sense.
That's awesome.
You're like, I want a brand photographer. Hopefully that's what everyone's like listening to this, right?
Yeah.
You know, start booking brand photographers, people.
It makes you think about it. It does. Like when you listen to it, you're like, yeah, it's so valuable to have those images to share.
Yeah.
Like you might think, oh, I don't really need it, or but it is good to have.
Yeah. And it's all that time that you're burning, like looking through your phone, like, do I have an image of this? Oh, I need to talk about this on social. I don't have any images to represent this, or they're not as good quality because you're going through your phone. And now you're burning so much time trying to find an image. And to have a nice little bank of images that you can always draw on is such a stress reliever that you don't have to worry about it. And when you do get a call from media that they want to feature you, you don't have to stress out like, oh my God, I don't have anything. Like now you can just pick and choose and feel confident that you're representing yourself and your business well with some great images.
Yeah. Is there worth in just, obviously you say if media contact you, is a lot of the worth in this just get them done anyway and have a bank? Or is there even more worth and more efficiency in, someone's contact? So say we've done our shoot, we've done our brand photography, Kate and I are really happy with it, We Are Makers has just contacted us to do something. Is there a different approach that you can then take, knowing that, hey, this is the book, this is the stylisation of the book, this is the story they want to tell? Is that a whole different process, or is it just more refined process exactly for that thing?
Yeah, if it's for a specific launch, then we really get granular and see what we can create to speak about all the different parts of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just about really turning the screw and knuckling down on that one thing.
Yeah, I mean, we still want the lifestyle. We still want to see who's behind it. We want to get details to really highlight if it's one specific thing.
Right, so your actual shortlist wouldn't change much at all with the sounds of things. You would keep with the old faithfuls. You would just make sure they're really on point.
Yeah, they're just the same categories. We just may refine how detailed we get, or if there's some unique element to it. And it's amazing how many different angles and perspectives you can get and capture.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
Even for us, like being on the podcast, being in people's workshops, sometimes I'm like, I so wish I could take a picture. But
I know.
We've spoke about this a lot. Like I think to be a maker, like the ultimate maker like package relationship is one person in the couple is shit hot at making stuff. The other person is shit hot at taking a good picture.
Yeah.
Because if you can do those two things, you're out there. Because ultimately, people just need to see you, right? There's 7 billion people on the planet, something like that. Like, how are you going to stand out? And that's exactly why we thought this was a really relevant first podcast for this new podcast series, because like this is the core of it all.
Yeah, you.
Like, packaging's one that will come up the road, but you can't package until you've sold something. Sales channels and e-commerce and setting up a website is one that will come down the road. Can't do that until you've got interest in what your products are. How do you get interest in what your products are? You start taking good pictures of them and you get it out there, right? So that's why I really like this as the sort of bridge leading into this new series for the podcast. So Nicole, we've talked loads about how you would set up a shoot and how you do your work and how brand photography is very different from photography. Less so in the actual photography side of things, but in the lead up to it and how you get so much more worth with that and add so much value to a maker. What makes these opinions so qualified? Your opinions here and opinion over fact, but I'm reading through, like I said at the start, like we've obviously got the digital photography certificate, right? We've obviously got but you've got like interior design and leadership, and how does that all bundle into Nicole Bedard, and how does that make you the right brand photographer?
So I do have, over a decade of experience in working with businesses. So I've seen so many different types of businesses in so many different industries. And I love being a champion and a cheerleader for all these businesses. And I love hearing the origin story. And I'm always just been curious and supportive of all these makers because it's not easy. So prior to becoming a photographer, I worked in more of a 9 to 5 setting, a non-creative world. And really from those experiences came my client management process and how I want to all that build up and strategy before a photo shoot. I really kind of draw on many of the things I was doing in more of a corporate setting. Another piece of my journey is I've always had kind of like a creative calling, even though I was going down a traditional path. And once I moved back to my home state, which is Massachusetts, I was so close to the Rhode Island School of Design, which like is at the top, that I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be this close to Rhode Island School of Design again. Like I should just do it. So I went to an information session for interior design because it was something that I really enjoyed and loved, and I still love to this day. And I signed up the next day and I went on this journey. I was still working full time for a software company. I was in a whole new world in an art school. It was so different from my traditional college and master's degree program that it really was the unlock to my creative side that I felt like, okay, like there's a potential, like I want to explore this world more. And then as I'm flip-flopping like my 9 to 5 type of traditional jobs, I end up working for the government. That's when I walk by a photography school for a year and was just dreaming about how amazing that would be. Because I was always the kid with a camera, even though like in high school, I was the athlete. I was always documenting what was going on, whether it was friends groups. I look back at my childhood photos and I'm like, where am I? And I realize I'm the one taking the photo on Christmas morning. So it was something, it was just a creative outlet that I was like, wow, that would be amazing. So yet again, I started the program and I'm just pulling all my management careers, all my design work at the Rhode Island School of Design, and I'm just merging those together. And that's why I think this type of photography is like my happy place, because I'm doing both the business and the creative, which I love. So that's kind of where my brain is always going. And I'm always a cheerleader for all these businesses because I get it. It's not easy to just build, just to have an idea and to see it grow. I'm just always so excited for every business.
Yeah.
You sound like a good fit as a brand photographer.
Yeah.
You sound like a really good fit.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you're very far away from us, so I can't imagine, unless you fancy a holiday in Scotland, you can come and do some photos while you're at it. Look, we've covered loads. Is there anything we've not covered that you want to cover? Ultimately, this is your podcast as well. Is there anything that you would like to cover?
The only other thing is, like, I want people to know that photography is something that any business can have. You're not out of market. You don't have to have huge budgets and a big presence to get killer images to market yourself. A lot of things that we discussed today, I have a ton of free resources, whether it's on my website, on my YouTube channel. I try to provide information to help others out there kind of navigate through this world, because sometimes it can be the Wild West. So I want to make sure people are getting the value that they deserve, because it's a lot of work and I want them to be proud of their images and conquer the world.
Yeah, that's it, and conquer the world. I like that.
And it's great to speak to people like you, because I guess as a maker, like, where do you even start to like find a photographer either? Like, I that's something that I'm always like, where do you start?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
you know, it's good talking to people like you, and having because we did talk about having a photographer's map, if you put it. But that's another to-do list.
Yeah, another thing on the to-do list. One thing that Kate says, the photographer's map, because we get contacted a lot, really want to be in your book, blah, blah, I've only got my own photos, I really want to get a professional photographer, but I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And that's always the thing, but I don't know where to start. And it's like, so the one thing we talked about was this map of qualified photographers that we could sit down and do this chat with, and we knew that they were worth their weight. So quickly to go back before we round up here, because you kind of skirted over the fact that you've got loads of free resources.
Yeah.
You kind of just by the way, I've got loads of free resources. What are those free resources, and where do people go to get them?
Okay, so free resources are on my website at nbedardphotog.com. So that's PHOTOG.com. And there is a tab that says resources, and there's many options on there. I have free guides on what to wear. That's always a common question. What do I wear for a photo shoot? I have a free guide on a timeline, because this isn't something you can call a photographer on Friday and hope to get a photo shoot on next week. So I provide a timeline that might be interesting. I also have a guide of a checklist. So many of the images that we talked about today, I have a checklist that people can see when they're talking to their photographer, they're educated enough to know I need X, Y, and Z. There's great blog posts. There's great YouTube videos that will show kind of a behind the scenes of all different photo shoots. And then I have 2 courses. One's on product photography, just using your iPhone. It's adapted from a course that I did at RISD. So it's really to help those that, might be doing some things on their own right now, because you can't have a photographer in your studio every single day capturing everything that you're doing or making. Yeah. So, and then the other course is for photographers who want to, get into this industry and want to learn kind of that back end process to make sure that you're providing the best service for people. So it's a lot of different, depending on where you are in your business, you should find something that is helpful there.
Nice.
That's fantastic. I'm on the resources thing now. I think I'll consume a bunch of them. Look, Nicole, thank you so much. Thank you so much for...
That was a great first one.
Yeah, piloting this whole thing that we're trying to get off the ground.
Yeah, thanks for offering your time. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I'm excited.
I'm very well aware time is the only thing we can't really get back, and you've offered us a whole bunch of your time. Right through from FaceTiming me while I was trying to cook dinner to talk this over to this. So hey, we're really, really appreciative of anyone who's listening to this that wants the free resources and all the value that Nicole's brought here today. It's nbphotog.com. So November Bravo, photog.com. And we'll put all that in the show notes as well. Nicole, thank you so much. It's been wicked. It's been really good. I hope loads of people can get stuff from it. I hope loads of people can contact you, use your resources, your YouTube videos. And what's your YouTube channel? We should mention that as well. I'll put that in the show notes too, because I know these are all hosted on YouTube. And yeah.
It's Nicole Bedard Photography on YouTube.
Nicole Bedard Photography on YouTube, and you've got the link there on your website as well. So hey,
nice.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. This was so much fun. I had a great time, and I hope people get some value out of it. I think they will.
I
hope so. I really hope so. Yeah. Nicole, thanks for being a fan, supporting us. I see you often, liking and bumping onto the questions that we ask on Instagram and whatnot. We really appreciated your time and your support from the get-go. So yeah, thanks so much, pal. We appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Great. Thank you.
Take care.